Nice to meet with Nicola, because we set up the Wadestown Facebook page, and Nicola's parents were booed over Waitani weekend, and it was terrible. And they moved into the house, and they smoked meth, and they destroyed the house, and they ripped up her wedding dress, and it was terrible. And that was off the back of probably about 20 separate incidents that we had heard about in Wadestown over the last year. People have been saying, oh, is it linked to protests? I don't think it is. It's been happening for a while. And then we looped in with Greg Highland here from the Highland Park Residents Association. Coincidental name. And here we are today, and unfortunately we can't have Sergeant Sarah Rittering, because she's downtown getting things thrown at her, but she has made a good phone call to me and passed on a lot of information to Emma McGill, who's the Wellington Coordinator for Neighbourhood Support. So Emma is Sergeant Sarah and Emma combined tonight, and we have Paolo Fiona from Wellington City Council. He's the City Safety Manager. He's been downtown really busy today too, so thank you for your time. We have our local MP Greg O'Connor, who will say a few words as well, and Nicola Willis, Deputy Leader of the National Party, who clearly has a lot of interest as well. So I thought what we could do is get some insights from Emma and Paolo on what they're seeing in our community and what other communities are doing to try and prevent crime, and some thoughts from Greg O'Connor and Nicola Willis as well, and then we'll open it up to the floor for some practical solutions that we can implement, and some hopefully with the help from the council too.
Is it ready? Yeah. I did have a very great conversation with Sarah today, where she was down at Parliament, so she obviously hasn't had a chance to go away and get all of the stats and stuff that she would normally bring to these kind of meetings. But she did say it's not tracking up, like there's no spike, it doesn't seem to have increased. What we tend to find in these environments is that us talking about them is what has changed. So we're more vocal on local pages and things like that, so we hear about it more, so we think more crime is happening when really it's actually been relatively steady. She's going to get back to us when she gets back in the office and gets through things, but she did say she's not seeing anything unusual out of Wadestown. That's not to say it's okay. And my background is I actually used to live on Barnard Street, and my car was stolen from Barnard Street when I was 10. So I really do know what you guys are up against. I think my husband's car was broken into about 4 times as well. But the thing with Wadestown is its topography really works against it in terms of crime. So we, for example, were down a long cable car, so we couldn't hear a thing being up the road. And that's common for a lot of Wellington, but in the suburbs that have that more than others do see an increase in the, I want to say petty crime, and it's not to the people it happens to, but it is the things like the car break-ins, the attempted thefts, the stealing of things from vehicles, because of the fact that people can't see and hear what's going on. Wadestown also has the added benefit of being really close to exit points, so onto the motorway, dropping down south. There's about 4 different ways you can get out of Wadestown should you get cornered here with police or what have you, which also works against it as well, unfortunately. So although there is crime happening, I think there's lots of things we can do about it. So my role now, and I used to work in the safety team at Wellington City Council, so I've kind of been on all sides of this, is I run neighbourhood support in Wellington and Pororoa, and actually Kapiti and South Wairarapa as well. It's the old neighbourhood watch, so some of you will remember neighbourhood watch. It's been around for years and years and years, and although it's moved away a bit from the, we call it curtain twitching of the reputation it got, it's more about now safety and resilience and knowing those around you, knowing who's in your neighbourhood, knowing what looks right in your neighbourhood, knowing what's out of place in your neighbourhood, and connecting with each other. So talking, and it's what a lot of you are already doing with the Facebook groups. I guess in essence, are pretty much what a neighbourhood support group is. But in terms of crime prevention, it really works because you've got people coming and going from their own homes at different times of the day that are the eyes and ears on the streets. You can't see from your own homes in often situations like this. And if you know your neighbours, you know then who's out of place in your street or what doesn't look right in your street. You can tell people if you're going to be away and your house is going to be empty, for example. And so therefore, if people are seen coming and going from your house by those same neighbours, they know that's not right. So it's a really basic simple thing, and we've got 250,000 households around New Zealand that are part of neighbourhood support. And crime prevention is kind of one of the themes. We do look at emergency planning for neighbourhoods, resilience plans. Lots of neighbourhoods have different issues. So, for example, in Island Bay, they've got tsunami plans, for their neighbourhood support group because that's what needs to happen in their neighbourhood. So, what happens is I would start up a neighbourhood support group per street. So we tend to keep it really close. So it is those houses that you see every day, those ones you walk past, the ones that you drive past, rather than trying to do a whole suburb. And then those streets often connect to each other for a wider network, like a Facebook page that might be a broader. So I'm happy to help any streets that want to set up a neighbourhood support group. It's really easy. We don't tell you what to do. We don't say you every month, you've got to meet every 3 months, you've got to take notes, anything like that. It is totally up to you guys what you want your neighbourhood support group to be. Some streets just want to meet each other and have each other's contact details. Others do want to meet regularly and have a chat. So it's really up to you guys. We have a great database called the Gets Ready database that we use as well, that members can register on, and in that we can keep information such as what resources people in your street might have, so in terms of generators, chainsaws, extra long ladders, if they're nurses, doctors, any of that kind of stuff. And that's linked more into the resilience and emergency side of things as well. So should there be issues in your area, and I'm not talking just a big earthquake, it could be a storm, it could be prolonged power cuts. We then know from that database who needs power for medical equipment, for example, and we also know that Bob down the road has got a generator, and we can help make those connections. So it's a really multifaceted thing, and I know we hear about crime predominantly tonight, but it's just kind of illustrating that it is really worthwhile belonging to sort of a neighbourhood support group. There's loads we can do, at the very least, tying you into your neighbours, so we don't have to come to meetings like this, I guess. I'll let Paolo deal in terms of the septic side of things, but if there are questions on the answer as well.
City Safety Manager for Wadestown City Council. My team work very closely with the police, Central Police, and also the CRS team. Some of the stuff that we've done in Johnsonville, some of the issues that we've had on, and I work with community and just having that presence on the street.
Can I just ask you to stand close to the computer, because some of the people online find it hard to hear. Would you mind just standing here? Sorry.
Just sort of half. Sorry, just halfway between where you are and.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So really, it's just we look at evidence and obviously reports from the police and identify hotspots, obviously where crimes are happening. And then what we do, we task and speak to our community patrollers and then have the police patrol the area. Community patrollers, we utilise the Southern community patrollers, even Tawa, Karori has just started the community patrollers earlier this year. So those are the partners we work with. What we really recommend people to do is if there's any issue with lighting, street lighting, or pruning of trees so you get more light, it's actually called a contact centre, or use the Fix It app. We have a Fix It app, I don't know if you've seen it. Just put it through and that will come to us and then pass to the right team. Septic staff, my staff member will do a report if you prefer that way, have somebody do a report around the area, see what we can do to improve the safety.
So the key thing is to report everything, right? Because this is what Sarah said.
Yeah.
She said crime doesn't seem to have been going up, but people might not be recording the broken window, the garage being broken into, because they just think, what's the point? The police is so busy. But just 105, right? It's 105?
Yeah, it builds a picture, and that's what they direct their police to.
Resources.
So, yeah, absolutely. You can do it online as well. This is an online form, so I know that there's some waits on the 105 number sometimes, so there's an online way of doing it. You can just send it straight through. So at least, even if you don't want to take it any further or nothing needs to happen, at least it's in the system as an incident in your area.
Kristen?
I have a question about that. So I was at Wadestown
growth on the footpath causes quite considerable issues with children, especially with car doors opening up, and I've seen a couple of near misses. I contacted the council and granted credit to the council, they acted, but they did a half job, and there's no follow-up. And this is the issue, so do I keep going back and back and back and telling them, because they cut it, but they've only just done makeshift, they're down to the makeshift job. And honestly, they'll be back again, because there's young kids who are running down that little footpath, and the door will open up, you've got nowhere to go.
But if you, ideally, whoever the contractor who came and dealt with that issue should have done a good job. So I can follow it up with our transport team, because they're the one who obviously managed the contractor who dealt with those issues. Thank you.
Hello, Louise Davies, the Community Centre Coordinator. Just wanted to make the suggestion that if possible, maybe Anya could follow up with Nicola. A lot of people still don't know the number of the contact centre, 499 4444, and the Fix It app, and just having those two things. Because often I'm walking at night and I can report a light that's out in the street, and you can just do it so quickly. And I know Greg is an expert on following up too, so those things are really helpful, quick helps.
Yeah, they're very useful, and what that does, when all the information comes in, we'll go through it and map up the areas where the complaints, the issues are coming from, and then we'll task the right team to address some of those issues. And we do give advice on, sometimes natural surveillance is really helpful, like if your hedge or your trees obviously blocking the view from your house, so the natural surveillance of you looking out on the street is very helpful.
So that's the SEPTED stuff we were talking about, and
Stuff,
for those, we shouldn't use that. Crime prevention through environmental design. So in its most basic form, it is things like street lighting, it is being able to see through trees and bushes, it's being able to see the road from your property, and just trying to get away from those dark spots. So both Paula's team and I do little audits or reports, so we did do a neighbourhood support group, I'm happy to come and look at your street and sort of say, okay, you would benefit from this or this. As well. So that's kind of out there in the arena. So if there is trouble spots as in a whole street where a lot is happening, then that's where Paula's team would probably come out and do a reassessment and see what can be done in terms of those environmental changes that we make that improves safety as well.
Yeah, there seems to be quite a lot on Sefton Street and on Pitt. It might just be because the Pitt people are so good at communicating.
Yeah.
But there does seem to be quite a lot around Sefton and behind the library.
If you think the lighting's not bright enough as well, just let us know. We can get our lighting team to assess it. We've been working out in Tawa, obviously increasing the brightness of the light as well. So just put it through and we can look through it and make sure the team will come out here and address it.
Yes, so Greg from the Highland Park Residents Group. Highland Park and most of Wadestown had LED lighting installed by the city about 2-3 years ago. So other than it being overgrown, I think you'll find the majority of our lighting is already LED. So it's pretty much the best we can get.
So once again, if you put it through, and make sure you take that reference number, and I'm happy to email it. You can email it to me, and then I'll follow up with the right team within the council.
So they can increase the levels, the brightness of those lights.
It's just the lines that keep me in. I never know, because we are in Parliament Crescent at the end. We seem to be at a junction for all the lines to Wadestown. We've got so many lines outside our window. So they go on to the electricity department and say, look, this tree is growing through the lines. They say, oh, it's not our line. But I don't know whose line.
Yeah, just like I said, just put it through, and our team will come out and assess it. And if we need to prune it or maybe remove the trees, they can make that call.
So I'm not sure what it's through to.
Oh, so,
Oh,
Wellington City Council. Yeah.
I think really good if I can send some stuff to you after this, and if Paolo sends a few contact details, and you put out one big email or Facebook post with all of the different contacts on it.
Yeah, and I'll catch up with Sarah to go through here, obviously, where all the hotspots are, and we can assess that. And I do, our Hapayake team as well have been visiting and some of the sites, like Aotearoa, Tawa, just having that present and engage with the community. So just have that present and very helpful.
Thank you, Paolo. Was there anyone online who had any questions? Just type them in if you do. Sorry, I should have said that Councillor Rebecca Matthews and Councillor Diane Calvert are also online. So that's great. Okay, do you have anything to add, Greg?
Well, look, I was just going to say, Nicola's got a bill she's got to go and speak on, so you can go first, Nicola, and I'll speak after her.
Can I just thank Greg, it's very gracious of him. There's this thing called the Members' Bill ballot, and you get to draft a piece of legislation, put it in the ballot. It's sort of a miracle if it gets picked, and then if it advances to second reading, it's a second miracle because it means it's got support from across the House. So I would hate to miss the opportunity to be there for the second reading of the bill. So thank you very much, Greg. Look, can I just acknowledge Anya and Nicola, because I think the fact that they've taken this initiative on behalf of the community to get people together and to discuss what is clearly an emerging concern is really important, because I think, as Emma has made really clear, when communities do come together to address these rising issues, then it can make a real difference. So I want to acknowledge you, and I do want to acknowledge what Nicola's parents went through, because that is really devastating, and the thought of that happening to your neighbour, to your friend or your family member is really quite awful, and the idea of that happening here in Wadestown, I'm sure, is upsetting to many of you, and we wouldn't wish it on anyone. So I want to acknowledge that, Nicola, and to your parents. And I want to acknowledge all of those who have had some crime occur, because I think with crime, sometimes people say, oh, well, it's not victimisation, it was just a break-in, or it was just a broken window. But actually, when that happens to you, you feel very victimised, because your feeling of safety and security is eroded, and your sense that things aren't quite right and people aren't playing by the same rules really grows. So I understand why that's brought everyone together in this room. And I, as I say, want to acknowledge Emma's effort, because I've seen the effort that community patrols can do, and the effect it has for neighbours to know that you've got other people looking out for you. So I do really support that. And I think it's also very important that we report to the police, because actually the police need to be very clear about rising levels of crime if they're occurring in the community, so that we can make sure that resources are directed appropriately. It's certainly been my experience in central Wellington, and I see Matt McLaughlin here, who's done a lot of advocacy in this area, that where police see that a community is concerned about crime, they are really willing to work together on addressing those issues. So having these sorts of meetings and raising awareness is really important. And can I also just acknowledge the role of the various community leaders in making sure that those who might not otherwise come forward feel that they are able to do so. So, look, certainly as a Member of Parliament, it's my job to make sure that we advocate for the police to have the resources that they need and to make sure that they respond appropriately. What I see here is a group of community people who are willing to come together, and it's my view that you will be able to make good progress as a community and as neighbours. So if there are ever concerns that you have, you don't feel that the council or the police are responding appropriately, never hesitate to write to us. It's also our job to lean on them, and I know that with Diane and Rebecca, you've got good local advocates as well. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing more of what you have to say and more questions later tonight. If I run away, it's not for rudeness, it's for excitement, because when an opposition MP actually sees legislation progressing through the House, it feels very miraculous. So I'm doubly grateful to Greg tonight, not only for letting me speak first, but also because his party is supporting my legislation tonight.
Kia ora everyone, and I'll just start by again saying, Anya, you and Nicola, I mean, this is a good sized meeting by any standards, particularly to have another 15 here. I mean, there's many a meeting held in a cold hall late on a Wednesday evening that you're probably lucky to get a front row for. So that just shows that the issues are real. Just a couple of issues that have come up here, they're quite wide-ranging. But what I just want to do is talk about, well, my background here. I was a police officer in Wadestown, or the whole northern suburbs here, in the 1970s. And believe it or not, there was actually more crime then than there is now. It won't surprise some of you because there was still a lot of those old boarding houses around. And you remember particularly in Thorndon, before Thorndon gentrified, there was a lot, when you went down the bottom of the hill, they weren't sort of the very $1 million houses down there now. There were often a lot of low-cost housing down in Thorndon. And so, as a result, there were a lot of burglaries here. The other thing that used to happen is that every night time there was a southerly, a group of thieves from Levin would come down here because they knew, for the very reason that we talked about here, Emma, that the streets were narrow, it was windy. I remember doing a stakeout down here when we knew they were coming down from Levin. I was sitting in the car waiting for it to get broken into, and it wasn't until they got to my car we knew, because it was so easy for them to do it, just smash a window and get in. So in that way, Wadestown is actually, as Emma's already said, it's a bit of can be a bit of an easy target. What has changed, I suppose, is the demographic has changed. So a lot of the people who traditionally would do the burglaries or that type of crime, they have to go through some fairly obvious spots to get here. That's one protection you do have. On crime, actually, I've got some in-laws who live in Malvina Major, who are some of the most crime-hard people to get. They'd be the hardest people ever to get a crime. They live in the Malvina Major, they live on the first floor, there's no chance to get burgled, but they were victims of crime. What happened? $80,000 telephone scam. They weren't afraid of that. They never really thought it was really real crime, because it wasn't the real crime they read about in the newspaper. It was a crime, but $80,000. Most of them have been victims of crime once in their whole lives up until that time. So it just gives an idea that crime is everywhere. So look, coming back to what we're talking about here, look, it's put it. The first thing, we go back to talk to Sarah, because when this meeting came up tonight, it's with Sarah, who's the sergeant in Johnsonville, community sergeant in Johnsonville, covers the area from Karori basically through to Tawa. And so I looked at the statistics, and the statistics show that actually, as Emma said, the crime, it's here, but it's actually not spiking. So you wonder what has happened, that makes people here quite so worried about it. There's a lot of sort of thought, and if you look at what's happening right now, I've just come from Parliament. I think Nicola, you're probably down there this afternoon as well. Quite unbelievable scenes down there. But what I will tell you on behalf of your police, you might say I'm the Toyota man, I would say that, but boy, I was very, very proud of my ex-colleagues down there today. To right to the extent I watched them, there was just a scene, you'll see go right down in front of the university at the moment, and there was someone who was taunting them, trying to get them to come out, and they held their line. If someone had gone out, it would have caused all sorts of problems. So the discipline that has been shown down there is incredible. So you do have a very good police force. They are professional. If you want to see, you have any doubts about that, actually have a look at Hay. However, that doesn't, it doesn't sort of fix the problem with the road outside. It doesn't fix the problem with the trees either, and it also doesn't mean that there will be no crime. But what you do need to know is that actually someone cares. The other thing that there's a myth, the old days were always so good. I went on to become a detective here, and nobody ever investigated burglaries. All it ever was a great big stack of files, and it wasn't as though police sort of ever really investigated them. Now, every burglary is actually, I will tell you now, it is actually it is properly recorded, and it will be investigated. If not specifically, it will be followed up. And more importantly, someone will be accountable for it. No one was ever accountable for burglaries before. Now, I'm not here to sort of send you away sort of thinking everything's fine. But what I will say is that like many things in the worlds that you exist in, we're all a lot more professional, whatever profession we're in. I think the police are actually a lot more professional, and within the resources they have, and there's always going to be resources, they have a lot. one for the sponsors. They have 1,800 more police are coming. At the moment, it's up to about 1,300 or 1,400. There are actually more police officers out there. And another bust today on methamphetamine. And you might say, why do we talk about methamphetamine here in Wadestown? Well, the reality of it is a lot of the burglaries, a lot of the crime now is because of methamphetamine. So when you see that large quantities of methamphetamine being taken off the market as they were today, that actually does something that directly, or certainly not, does actually impact on what we're talking about here today. So look, I don't want to dominate the meeting, and I certainly am not going to try and soft-soap the fact that there is crime, and that someone needs to be accountable for it, someone needs to, and they are. The local police and the district commander is held accountable for lots of burglaries. And if there had been a spike here, if there is a spike here, you can guarantee you will get that extra operation. And just I want to finish finally, one of the problems is we read about, and that you think about, as an older audience here, there used to be a lot of police and court news in the paper. So you would read about a crime, and then you'd turn the page, and the court news would be so-and-so convicted of this, so-and-so convicted of that. Well, what used to happen until recently, the police, the Independent Herald, which some of you get in their letterbox, would just have a list of the crimes that were committed. And I said to them, why don't you get a list of the people that are arrested for them? Because all you read about is so many cars, so many demios have been broken into. Actually, yes, we read about the crime, but we never actually read the police have arrested someone. They have actually prosecuted people for it. And that's a bit of an unfortunate way of, there's no reporters down at the court anymore. You just aren't there. So when was the last time you read about, unless it's a particularly big crime, that actually anyone being convicted? The police are catching people here, they are convicting them, and they do go to jail, believe it or not. So in the robbery, there was a robbery here 2 years ago down at the dairy here. The offenders were actually identified down there. I'm not sure actually what the send-off they got in spoke recently, but there's so police are actually, they are catching people down here. So it's a little bit of a revolving door, I know. It's not ideal, but things are happening. So with that, I'll, any questions or however you now, Anya, want to
Thanks, Greg. Well, shall we open it to the floor for ideas?
Can I just add one thing to what Greg was saying? In terms of the follow-up from burglaries, quite often the more evidence you can give them, the better. They tend to catch those people then doing it somewhere else, and it's linking them back to yours that's quite important. So it's things like you do have CCTV footage. Again, if you know that your neighbours have cameras around you and you are burgled, it's easier to go to them and sort of, if you know them, to say, do you have footage from this night? All of that kind of stuff, and again, that reporting, because although they might not get anybody there and then for yours, it could be a few months later. I know there was several cases in Churton Park and they were actually caught, I think, in Johnsonville doing something else and linked back and prosecuted for those ones back in Churton Park as well. I mean, it doesn't help you get back, but at least it means when they are caught, it's a heftier consequence if they're able to link it back.
Yeah, that's a good point. Matt, do you have any ideas?
Can I stay here and come there?
Come up here.
So everyone, I'm Matt McLaughlin. As Nicola mentioned before, I'm a Wadestown resident. I'm a hospitality operator in the city. I do work on a couple of initiatives, being a Paniki Promise with the Wellington City Council, but also a sexual assault prevention campaign called Don't Guess the Yes that we rolled out in the city, which has been really effective as well. And I can see some of the things that we're talking about here having some synergy with Don't Guess the Yes, because as Emma just said there, I think that the big things that I've taken out of what has been said here today is the fact that we need some tools as a community to try and actually do something about this. Still, well and good, having a yarn about it, but what can we actually physically do to help fix these problems? And I think that information sharing for me is a big one. We're in a suburb where I'd imagine there's probably not as many security cameras in any houses anywhere in Wellington, which can be a really useful tool. I think we need to be sharing that information. We need to work out a way that we can bring it back to a central point, as Emma said. How that looks, I'm not quite sure. That's probably something that you guys could help roll out.
Yeah, we're actually piloting in Tauranga. I think they have, as part of their neighbourhood support database, they have that information on who has cameras as well. So again, if somebody is burgled, it's easy to link them into those local people who potentially have them.
Because in in the city we have a Facebook page called the Ones in Hospital Group. All the bar owners and security guards, we share information about problematic patrons that we see walking around the city. And I see something like this being probably not quite the same, but I think the more information that we're sharing, again with Don't SDS, we talk about bystander intervention, being able to stop sexual assaults, and I think bystander intervention for us as a community as well is going to be really, really valuable. Somehow if we can pull all that information together and put it in a central point to be able to share back with the police, it may not necessarily stop some of the issues that we're seeing, but eventually down the line it may do. And then just the other point I wanted to touch on is the SIPTech is a really useful tool as well, the crime prevention through environmental design. We use it in the city. It might not seem like much trimming the trees back or the lights, but it does actually have a really big impact. So I would suggest that we do report things if we don't see them. If you've got your the issue that you had up with the kindergarten, if you don't think you've got the desired response, I think we've got Rebecca and we've got Diane and Simon there. Escalate it to your counsellors because that's part of their role as well. If you don't feel that you've got the desired response, go back to your counsellors and get them to sort of shake the tree a little bit because that's part of their role. So.
I've already downloaded the app and put it on. So
It's
easy.
That was just a couple of thoughts from me. Thanks.
Right, thanks, Matt. Yeah.
Kia ora everyone. My name is Glenn McDonald and I'm actually a detective inspector in the police. I've just come up from the command centre today. It's been a long 17 days. But I'm here. So really, we've heard lots of really awesome stuff tonight. And I guess, first of all, I live in Wadestown. I'm just in Rankin Street. Been here for 7 years now. And it's a real shame Sarah couldn't be here tonight, and I know Sarah well. And as everyone's talked about, the stats actually haven't got any worse. So I guess from speaking from a law enforcement perspective, we can sort of take a bit of a deep breath and go, we're not looking at anything worse than we've already had. But I think what we have missed in the conversation tonight is just thinking a little bit about some of those basic things that I know a lot of us will be doing, but perhaps some of us aren't. And look, as long as I've been a police officer here in Wellington for 21 years, Cecil Road, Sefton Street, Sar Street have always been those common targets for vehicle theft, right from Greens Day, coming through to my generation and the youngsters that are out now.
I think you just said you're old.
Yeah. Don't worry, my staff call me old, so you get used to it. Don't keep your valuables in your car. Don't leave stuff visible inside a window when people can just wander past and have a look. Look, I've seen people go as far as leaving their car unlocked so the windows don't get broken. So if people just open it, there's nothing in here to steal, carry on. I'm not suggesting you do that, but some people have. But the other big thing, and Lauren here, she's our neighbour, and we're always talking to each other about, hey, we're going away for the weekend. Oh yeah, we're doing this. We've got another lovely lady in front of us who lives there on her own. My son's been clearing her letterbox all week because she hasn't been around. So it is just about keeping connected in with our communities and making sure we're doing some of those basics, but doing them really, really well. And I guess just as I finish, if anyone has any issues here in Wadestown and they want to reach out to me, I'm always open to providing advice or help. Any of you can, you'll know someone in here who will know me, and there wouldn't be a week or two go by where I don't get a phone call about some type of thing in the enforcement space that I can help someone with. So again, my door's always open for practical advice or any sort of advice in that space. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
We can't just say thank you, having watched outside the window what you and your team have been dealing with for the past few weeks, the bravery you've shown, the stoicism, and it can't be nice to your family saying goodbye in the morning knowing you're going to face that. So thank you very much.
So one thing that I think is really good is Pitt Street and Rankin Street and Highland Crescent and Barnard Street all have their own WhatsApp groups.
I've been in Highland Crescent for 37 years.
Well, perhaps not everyone is on it, right? So it would be really great if there was, one person on each of those streets that door knocked and invited every single house to be on the WhatsApp group, and if they didn't have WhatsApp, teach them how to download it so you have it. because I was with some friends last night, and the Highland Crescent one came up. Oh, there's a white van. There's a white van looking strangely at houses. And Rachel, who lives on Highland Crescent, told me. And I was like, oh, and then about 10 minutes later, my camera went off on my driveway. And I was like, oh, it's a white van. And I said, oh, it's Ekaterina Meats. Delivering, lamb to Wadestown residents. But, that would have been really useful if it was in fact someone burging a house, right? So it would be really good if everyone went, because I'll do it for my street, I'll do it for Wild Street, I'll door knock and get a WhatsApp group thing going so we can share that information.
And it would be great to then link them into neighbourhood support, because we send out monthly crime reports, we get information from Sarah and other local police about if there is a spike in your area, so that comes out via our information as well, so we could be saying, hey, Wadestown is actually having a spike in vehicle crime, just be aware of all of that. So even if one person from each street group was linked in formally to neighbourhood support, so they got that information, would also be useful.
Would it be worth pulling it into one central location like WhatsApp, like a Facebook group, where you can share it right through the community? It's great that the streets are talking, but if that white van had gone off somewhere else.
How should we do it? Because as soon as we put up that notice about this meeting on the community Facebook page, since then our membership has gone up about 40%, and there have been some people from nowhere near Wadestown.
Yeah.
And so we've started, and you look at them and you're like, yeah, I don't know about you. And so we declined, it's not very good. But, so I don't know whether that's the right forum, because it's got 1,100 members now.
I think maybe you need to kind of verify that.
It needs to be more private.
Like someone knocking on the door or referring a neighbour,
Well, maybe we need a champion per street, and all of the champions then together have their own WhatsApp group or something.
The risk you run when it gets too big is you do have your phone pinging all day, because you're covering a whole suburb rather than just your street, and then people turn it off. They unsubscribe or whatever, which is why.
So maybe it's just one representative per street, or cluster of streets, or who feeds it.
But that would be where I would say that you would almost set a list of rules that you actually, rather than just say, I've seen someone dodgy with no shoes on walking down the street, you set a list of rules, again, like we do with the hospitality industry. We talk about 3 or 4 different things that we're looking out for, and so there'll be 3 or 4 different things that we're looking out for through Wadestown, and we're reporting on those things rather than reporting on every little thing that you're seeing, a car backfiring or a Cortina down the road.
I think you still need the two levels, because you do want that group where you can say, hey, I'm going away for the weekend without the whole of Wadestown knowing I'm away for the weekend. And then that next level with that information sharing, I guess, and then it does start getting quite, messy in terms of size.
I can put you in touch. One of the residents is at data lawyer, a privacy lawyer, and she might be able to advise you on the perils of setting up a suburb one.
You look at I Love Corey. I Love Victoria, and there's an I Love Corey.
That's right.
It's very full on. And that's, I guess, the people publishing their front door camera pictures and loads of chickens in Corey that we but it can get quite heated as well when people publish pictures or people get told they're moaning because they said their window got smashed off, and that is important to people. That's annoying and it's expensive. And if you go and put it on a forum to be told that you're just a Karen, it's not helpful as well. So I guess you've got to
It can be quite helpful. One day someone posted on it that some children had been seen crossing the road at a very busy corner, and it had the descriptions of them, and I was on the phone to my husband, and 10 minutes later he was apologising to me and telling me he was going to be teaching them the road rules.
And that's absolutely has its place. I just mean in terms of that sharing of images in particular, you're right, there would need to be some advice around that, because I don't know what the law is with that.
I think ultimately too, though, remember, if you're seeing suspicious behaviour in front of you, call police. That's what we're there for. And people go, oh, I don't want to ring you just because I saw a suspicious person. But let us make that decision if we're too busy or not. Now, just 2 weeks ago, I was wandering down to work. I wandered down about 5 in the morning, and 2 police cars came racing up the hill, and I thought, well, that's a little bit weird, because you don't often see them come up. So I jump on my work phone, and sure enough, there'd been a suspicious male seen on one of the streets here, and they found him. It was all legit, no problems. Carry on. So at least I always say to anyone I know, call police. they can then make a decision if,
Yeah.
no, look, we've got no staff and we're too busy. But if we don't know, we don't know.
Which number would you?
111.
Yeah, what's the difference between 111 and 105 there?
So,
Is
yeah.
it a summation of what two channels are for?
Yeah, so 111 is, nothing's changed here, we all know what that's for. 10.5 is the number where you would report a crime that's historically occurred.
Okay.
So you have a burglary, theft ex car, something,
Right.
and we're talking offences that don't involve people. So if you were a victim of family harm or something, don't ring 10.5, ring 111.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, about 2 weeks ago, a resident who can't come tonight, she was at the Plunkett Park with a bunch of parents and a bunch of little kids, and she's got the prettiest little blonde girl who's at kindy, and she saw a long camera lens in the bush, and there was a guy taking photos of her daughter and other kids, and she said to the other mums, you know, and he said, and they were like, oh my God, there's a guy taking. She went up to him and she said, you're not taking photos of the kids, eh? And he moved the camera over to the Plunkett building and said, oh no, I'm taking photos of the Plunkett building. And she said, no, you're not. And then he packed up and left, and she got his license plate number.
Right.
And she rang, I think she rang 10.5, not 111.
Yeah.
She doesn't, I don't know what's happened since, but, you know, that was after school.
That's exactly what you want. The old story would say, if it doesn't look right, it's not right. If someone comes and knocks on your door and you're up with some excuse, then, oh, that's strange. There's only one reason they're doing it, it's everyone's home. If it doesn't look right, it's probably not right.
Yeah, so that's good. Call the police.
I've got a question here, maybe it's to do with the council members, probably a discussion for the council, but Wadestown is known for free parking for a lot of transient people from Levin, so people from Levin come down and they park and they catch the number 14 bus to the town. And the issue around this is it's just the invitation to treat. And the thing is that because there's so many transient cars that come in and park during the day, our streets are quite quiet during the day, it's an invitation to treat for all criminals because, hello, there's a new car. And the biggest issue is that will the council look at residential parking in Wadestown, especially around bus stops? And the issue, and that's the problem, it causes congestion, it causes more problems for people coming in. Now this is pre-everything, this has been happening for the last 10, 15 years, and the council really has done nothing about it to address the situation. And the problem is that crime is one thing, but traffic problems is another. You say about you clip them in rear vision mirrors. They're clipped because cars can't move down the streets because there's so many transient cars coming in, parking out for the day, and buggering off into town.
Alright.
Yeah, look, I'll talk to our team tomorrow to see what they can do, because he has to go through the committee.
Well, I think it's a council, it has to be a council decision.
Because when you change things,
Careful with the ask. It's not always having lived in places that have bought that residence parking, and don't forget that it doesn't discriminate. You have to pay. So I'm just saying.
Look, it's another stream of income. I've lived overseas for the last 10 years, and they have residential parking districts in the city I live in, and to be honest, it works. We've got a decent bus service on the number 14 bus. It works.
One of the issues you might strike in that is that, having said that, what happens when someone comes to visit you and doesn't have a residential park space? So they could have Greg said, unintended consequences.
All week, one is electrician.
Well, as I'm saying, it's around the bus stops that need residential parks. It's not
Only more happens.
It just moves the problem. I think it probably just moves the problem further out. As soon as we've got residents parking in a certain place, people just go to the next place where it is, and it just moves it just to the next easiest place.
It works in Florida. Yeah. And it works quite well, because not every car park is a resident car park.
But
there is designated ones. The only problem is the council just changed the policy on parking last year. And they decided that the resident parking permit doesn't need to be affixed to the windscreen. and that stops self-regulation. So that's crazy. We're contesting that in Thornton because that disempowers the people who have paid permits. They can't tell whether they're competing with a vehicle that's permanent or not, without involving the council, which is essentially cost and lack of efficiency. So there are some issues I think that are easily fixed, but when it's working, it seems to work okay. And Thornton is an area that's treated like a parking lot with Wellington's commuters. So we know the issue for the campsite now.
I know this is about the homes in the suburb, but I would really like to acknowledge our current chairman of the Highland Park Progressive Association. I'm sorry, with masks on, I presume he's here, I'm not sure. Sorry, he's got his finger on the pulse, he always speaks to us, he weed eats there, he's just absolutely fantastic. If I had a problem in the street, I know where he lives.
Thank you. I've been working on SIPTED for about 15 years in Wadestown, so way ahead of you all.
Did you want to add anything?
Not really, no.
Okay, so, oh yeah, Mark, sorry.
So on Mark Roski and before the school, and we have noticed an uptick on things like, tagging, graffiti, and little things around the school. And the thing I've learned from this is we ought to report it, because we just clean it up, or we fix it, or we thank the person who's informed us, or chase the people away. But the thing, one of the big takeaways is to report that stuff. And I can also just say that Leah is a great person to speak to, who can break up the school. And we did an incident at school, and the police came very quickly and helped. So I just wanted to say that I think to say that people are gathered for no reason, that it may not be statistically borne out. I would just sort of say, as a
You're saying it as well as well.
We have noticed that's come up from the board meetings. But thank you. It's good to.
Okay, well look, I think Matt, Greg and I should loop in with you guys, and we'll try to work out this communication system, which I think should probably look like a WhatsApp per street. Hopefully there'll be someone on most of the streets who can champion this, and then we'll get a communication out, basically, to inform people who couldn't be here what we learned.
With graffiti, so just hopefully fix it. My team is obviously involved with removal of any graffiti, because what we want to do is, as soon as it goes up.
Well, we volunteer to do it at our school.
Okay. Yeah, if you like, we do have a lot of paint provided by Recedes for us, right? Yeah, so we can provide that stuff for you if you want to.
So I've left some brochures up the front about neighbourhood support, just what it is and what we do. And even if we get some groups started and get some signage up, that helps as well. Sort of shows a bit of ownership for the street, and that there's people looking after it and things as well. We have a new logo. It's not the old blue and yellow one anymore with the bobby head. People with a bobby head on it. So they're nice and bright and visible and things as well.
Oh.
I just want to say something about the fix of that. 10 years ago, the Residents Association of Thornton had its own mapping program using Google Maps to establish what the pattern was, because there were special circumstances in Thornton, like motorways and other public areas where the graffiti people were going nuts at times. So we established a pattern, but Fix-It was taken on a few years later. And what it does is it really readily turns every one of us into a sensor. Because most of us have got one of these. The most important thing about it is taking a photograph. Because it not only gives intelligence about an algorithm can work out what the graffiti, probably who the author of the graffiti is, and exact pattern can be established. Hence that's intelligence which can be used by the police.
I remember that was my job to talk to you about it. She was like,
And then the other part is it also gives the people who have got the job of cleaning it up an indication. The photograph says what kind of surface is it. you know, is this on rock, or is this on a piece of wood, or, you know, a power pole? And they know they can respond much faster in terms of how to clean it up. So there's a lot of benefits. But just remember, you're a sensor, and you're connected to a network, which can be connected to the database through a device or an app like Fitzer.
It could be anything, like if you're going for a walk on those trails, obviously Taumata here, if you see something on there, just take a photo and send it through. Our park ranger or tent.
Water leaks,
Footpaths now, obviously even put it through.
Okay. Okay, well thank you for coming everyone. Oh sorry, one more.
I'm not an expert on social communication, but we have internal here a group which is based on Facebook. So I'm just wondering, is there a difference between the two? Is there an obvious preference between Facebook and WhatsApp?
No, I think whatever works for your community. Yeah, it's just that some people don't like Facebook and don't want to be on Facebook, that's all. Whatever works, I would say. Yeah.
What's also nice about WhatsApp is it's end-to-end coding. So when we're talking about putting information into databases and communicating,
It's
remember the Chromes are getting sophisticated with technology too. So look for the technologies that are more secure.
Mm.
And the ones that currently, you know, intercept it easier. And WhatsApp one of those.
Right. Okay, well, thank you everyone.
Thank you.